If you are suffering because of love, whether it's because you've been left or because your love is unrequited, this video is for you. This will be a video with some rather challenging reflections, perhaps not 100% accessible to everyone, but I believe these are very important thoughts that can help people feel better and in general make progress on their own life journey. If you don't know me, let me introduce myself. I'm Daniela Coin, a professional educator and Jungian coach specialized in male personal and relational growth. So I help men feel better about themselves and as a result have more beautiful and healthier relationships with women. Now, what can we say about the pain of love that has ended or about love that is not returned? When you love someone, you usually want that person to return your love. So in most cases, it's completely normal and understandable for most people to suffer if that feeling isn't reciprocated, especially if you're deeply in love. But unfortunately, what we mean by the concept of love, of falling in love on an emotional level, especially in the context of relationships, that is, romantic relationships between two lovers, people who desire each other and want to be together and build a relationship. What we usually mean by love when we use this term is, unfortunately, not what love truly is. And it's important to understand this because love has nothing to do with possession and need, which characterize to a greater or lesser extent all romantic relationships that can exist. And in this case, for example, between a man and a woman, since I work with heterosexual men who have relationships with women. So, in general, we could specify, or rather, we should better understand that love is something else. It is a feeling that is given, that is offered because we possess it first and foremost within ourselves. We have love for ourselves and therefore we can share it, we can give it, we can offer it to others, we are able to extend what we are, we give it to people, to animals, to things. Love is giving and sharing. Whereas, unfortunately, what we usually consider to be love is not really the feeling of love, unfortunately. What are they usually? Projections, fears, desires, hopes. Above all, they are needs and expectations that end up being unmet. So when we suffer, we are not suffering because of love, as we believe, but we are suffering because one of our needs, one of our necessities, which is human, okay? It is still part of our personality and in any case is also pushed and amplified by our egoic needs, which happens to everyone. However, what happens is that this need drives us to seek the fulfillment of our needs outside ourselves. So what happens is this. We look for a person, we are with a person, we fall in love with that person, and one of the reasons, the main one, is precisely this. A need, something we require that this person fulfills, and if it is fulfilled, it makes us feel better. There are expectations, for example, about life, about how life should be, expectations that often are not even our own personal ones. For example, many people want to have, a family, children, to follow a certain path professionally as well as romantically, because they have expectations about how life should be. Because someone said, if you are a complete person, you have to get married, you have to start a family. If no one wants you and you don't get married, you're not good enough, you're worthless, you're not enough. If you don't find a girlfriend, then it means you're worthless, you stay single, you're useless. If you can't fulfill yourself, have children, you haven't accomplished the purpose for which you came into the world, so you're good for nothing. All bullshit that has been passed down to us for generations and generations, convincing us, on top of our own ideas, which we don't even know what they are because we don't know how to listen to them, since we're full of ideas that have been drilled into us. So they convince us that we should be a certain way. So we end up having expectations. Other expectations come from what our partner makes us create. We often unconsciously ask for these expectations to be created for us. We ask our partner, for example, not to leave us, to give us guarantees, to stay with us forever, to love us forever, to promise us that A, B, C, D will happen. And then, of course, all these expectations, unfortunately, are almost always destined to be disappointed. And you might be saying, Daniela, but look, there are plenty of people, in case you didn't know, who have lots of expectations and goals in life, and they achieve them. There are so many people who say they want to have a family, children, and ever since they were little, maybe, they've had this desire, this will, this expectation, in fact, and this hope, and then they succeed and they're happy. The answer is twofold. Yes, there are many people who have these expectations, these needs, and they achieve them. And you might ask, are they also happy? Yes, yes, and no. Some people are happy because for certain people, certain types of people, those who are not ready to evolve beyond a certain threshold, for these people, fulfilling an expectation, a life goal, that objective they had set for themselves is enough to make them happy. That is, many people are happy because maybe they got the job they had wanted all their life. They had the children they hoped to have. Maybe they did something super amazing for their life. They managed to achieve results in sports or a particular hobby, and as a result, this makes them happy. They are simple. They fulfill a desire of the personality, of the ego, and since they live on the level of ego and personality, that is, they are totally identified with their own character, with what they have created, since in their mind that character has to do A, B, and C. When that character does A, B, and C, they feel fine, they feel satisfied, they feel fulfilled. Obviously, this is an extremely superficial kind of fulfillment, right? You realize this because it gives you a happiness that is strictly tied to the achievements you've reached. Therefore, in the case of someone who has found fulfillment through their children, through family, through work, or through some achievement, be it in sports, a hobby, or anything else, if you take these external things away from that person, they collapse. There are even people who commit suicide because they've lost their job, lost a child, or spend their whole life in depression over losing something. I'm not saying that these things aren't important, that a child's health or having a good job aren't important things. What I'm saying, however, is that there are people who are so identified with their role, with their persona, with the part of their psyche through which they relate to the outside world. They are so identified with the ego, with what they have created, that if they lose ego-driven achievements, achievements tied to their personality, they have nothing left because they don't know who they are on a deeper level. They no longer have a purpose in life. They may no longer have emotions that are alive in and of themselves, but only emotions that exist in relation to something or someone else. But you might say, what do you mean, Daniela? That emotions, what we feel, who we are, shouldn't exist for the sake of someone else. Obviously, since we are social animals, you might say we need to interact with others, right? The answer is sort of. I mean, there are certainly needs, even practical ones, that push us to interact with other human beings. But it's one thing to have a need and find a person who, for example, fulfills that need. Let's say, for instance, my faucet is leaking. I call the plumber and he fixes it, okay? That's one thing. If plumber A isn't available, I call plumber B. The important thing is that the faucet doesn't leak, meaning the need is met and it's functional. Another thing, on the other hand, is, for example, attaching ourselves to someone on a relational level or having expectations even in terms of work, achievements, and everything that comes with it, so that if things don't go the way we imagine they should, our personality suffers, we feel hurt, our ego goes crazy, and it creates such a high level of imbalance that we're no longer able to feel okay. There's a big difference. We are often identified with the ego, with the personality, with the mind that wants to keep everything under control to protect us, that wants everything in order, that has needs, demands, expectations, and that feels wronged if things don't go a certain way. And from this point of view, we necessarily have to understand that we are not this, we are not the ones acting this out. It is a part of us. But there is another part of us that most people do not know that has absolutely nothing to do with all of this. It is a part that has its own balance in and of itself. But this balance does not come from, for example, having the self-esteem we need, or maybe the sun shining outside, or it being a beautiful day, or having the money to buy what we need, and a whole series of things lined up to make us feel good. Maybe we have a wife, we have children, we have money, we have a car, we have a house. The well-being I'm talking about, on the other hand, has nothing to do with this. This well-being is something that resides within us and does not change according to events. In other words, events happen and need to be managed, right? We can certainly have perhaps a purpose, a direction, a project, but it's one thing to have a purpose, direction, and project, and to be identified with that purpose and project and to suffer if that thing doesn't come to fruition. And it's another thing to live, let's say, in the flow, in that state of flow where we let ourselves be carried by life. Obviously, though, we must also take great care to make important choices, but not choices based on the ego and personality that want to achieve a certain thing. Rather, choices that are based on what we feel is truly good for us. Okay? So my inner feeling might tell me something that is completely unconnected to and different from what my personality might tell me. Let's take an example. Maybe my personality might tell me that, I don't know, I need to find a husband, have children, because that's what people do, because everyone does it, and that's how it should be. Women are supposed to do that. But my inner feeling might tell me, Daniela, go save the whales with Sea Shepherd, maybe on a pirate ship somewhere in the world's oceans because that's what you like. Do this because it's what you feel you want to do. If my inner feeling tells me this, I have to listen to it. So, which path should you follow? The answer is that it doesn't matter which path you choose. The path you choose, whether it's starting a family or going on a boat to save whales with the pirates, doesn't actually change your life. What changes and only changes is how you live in relation to these choices or opportunities that come your way. For example, if you feel that you want to go save the whales, but you can't manage to do it and you suffer because of it, you're no different from the person who, due to their personality and ego, desperately wants to find a girlfriend and have children. So the goal is not to do one thing rather than another in itself, regardless of where it comes from, but the goal should be to manage, starting from yourself, of course, but with a kind of, let's call it stoicism, with an attitude detached from the outcome to move toward what we feel we want. And in that state, that's when something different can happen. It may happen that something comes to you that you didn't know would come. And if you had used your controlling and directing mind, you would never have realized that maybe that thing that arrived new and unexpected is exactly what you need and what you wanted. So this thing that comes to you unexpectedly, if you reject it because it doesn't match your mental idea of your personality, of how your life should be, as if you actually knew something about yourself, about how your life should be, and the plans you've made for your life, maybe you think you know them better than anyone, and they're right, and what happens in reality is wrong. If you stop living with this perspective of it's not right, it shouldn't be this way, it's wrong, and instead live with the perspective of experiencing what comes to you, whether it's the end of a relationship, a woman who doesn't return your feelings, a job that goes badly, or anything else that might happen to you that you don't like, you learn to live in communion with who you are because you listen to what comes to you. You might try it, experience it, and gradually evaluate what is good for you and what is not. Instead, unfortunately, I have seen dozens, hundreds of people and relationships that had to be a certain way because people had identified with that idea of needing a partner or a relationship. And within that relationship, they might have suffered because on a deeper level, their true self wanted something else. Not necessarily another person, but maybe a different emotional state. It doesn't mean that the relationship necessarily has to end in order to find yourself, because that's absolutely not required. But it means that whatever happens in life, as long as we don't stand in the way, is right. Standing in the way of life by taking actions that can be positive or negative, obviously in relation to what is happening, almost always these actions are based on fear. And so we can say that any action based on fear, when we use fear to stand in the way of events, in that case, we can be sure that we are acting far from our heart, far from our true self. We are not connected. So getting together with someone because you're afraid of being alone, crap. Ending a relationship because you're no longer happy, crap. Because most of the time, all these actions are done under the influence of fear. On the other hand, a person who acts from the heart, who stays present, creates an action, whether it's starting a relationship, ending one, or even experiencing a breakup, that by staying in the heart, accepts what is without fear and lives through the experience. The experience can be anything, but what is certain is that if we get in the way by taking action, by forcing an action, starting from a place of fear, what is absolutely certain, 100% certain, is that we will not live through the experience that we actually need. So if you are feeling fear, whether, for example, you are in a relationship or you are alone, whether you want a relationship and are suffering because you don't have one, or you want to end a relationship because you are suffering, know that whatever you do, if it comes from pain and fear, you are acting from a mental place. And all the actions you take from the mind block the experience you actually need. Whereas the experiences that happen when we don't get in the way of life's events are the ones that truly transform us, burn away our beliefs, burn away our fears. They are the ones that really make us change. While when we act by forcing something because we believe it is positive, or by destroying or running away because we believe it is negative, we are preventing ourselves from the experience. And if we prevent ourselves from having the experience, we lose the lesson. And when you miss the lesson, unfortunately, 100% for sure, the same thing will happen to you again in life. Maybe in a different way, because you have to go through that experience. It's not magic, it's your subconscious that recreates the conditions to make you have that experience and that growth. And the thing you need to learn happens on its own, as long as you don't get in the way, whether in a positive or negative sense. If you get in your own way and say, I absolutely have to have a girlfriend because if I don't find one, I'm a failure, you end up with someone with whom you don't grow at all and you live a miserable life. Or if you say, no, I have to end this relationship because I'm no longer happy with this person, without actually checking if there's a lesson you need to learn. If you've resolved the inner conflict that's causing you problems with that person, then if you do this, you're depriving yourself of an experience. If you block this experience, you won't learn the lesson. Unless your experience is actually about learning to end things, and it almost never is, though sometimes it can be. Unless that's your experience, know that every situation in which you have been in a relationship or have been rejected from a relationship was there to help you understand something about yourself. If you haven't understood it, you have to take another ride on the carousel another day, the next time the fair comes around. Unfortunately, that's how it is. I'm really sorry to make such a blunt video and also a complicated one, if you will, because some people don't expect this kind of content. But it's right that those who have the chance to better understand how, let's say, life works, especially from a personal and relational point of view, should have the opportunity to benefit from these insights and this content. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you understood it, because I know it's not exactly accessible to everyone. Most people, unfortunately, aren't ready to accept this kind of content because it pushes them to change. But if you understood it and feel that what I said resonates with you, leave me a comment below, tell me what you think, and also share your experience if you like, and what you've decided to do from now on, to live according to who you are and not according to who you think you should be, or even worse, who others have told you that you must be. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll leave the button here in the center for you to click and subscribe. And up here I'll leave 2 videos for you to further explore your personal growth from a deeper perspective. So 2 more challenging videos for your personal and relational growth.